Right, the Ball newspaper is out with the headline, How Kalonzo Goof Cost Him the Presidency. And this is about the book For the Record by Defense Cabinet Secretary Aden Duale. I'll be talking about this extensively, but first, let's get back to our discussion tonight, because on the round table right here in the capital, I am joined by Seth Panyako, General Secretary, Kenya National Union of Nurses. He joins us tonight representing the laborers, those who are employed. I can't get that term. And of course, I have Stephen Obiro, who is representing tonight here the employers of the country. And there's a lot of proposals in the Finance Bill 2023 that touches on that and if it will affect possible relationships. I have also Bill Okero, former Senator, Mandera County, and Kimani Kuria, the Chairman, Finance and National Planning Committee of the National Assembly, is joining us live from Mombasa. Gentlemen, thank you for waiting up. Let's begin the discussion where Molo, Member of Parliament, left it. And I'd like to ask this to Bilo. Is it possible that Kenya can raise, because listening to what Kimani was saying, Kenya can finance to the tune of 100% of this budget by raising the taxes that will go into finance? Is it possible?
No, not this budget. This budget, let me. I think there is a fallacy in some of these statements which are being made by government. You don't draw up an expenditure budget of 3.6 trillion, then say, now how do I finance it? Then you start saying, I need revenue, to finance that. And your revenue in the last financial year is only 2 trillion. Mm-hmm. And the economy is not in a position to generate even much more than that. In fact, I highly doubt if this next month, when the year ends, we are not likely to get the 2 trillion we got last year. So the policy is you're assuming that I have to have this expenditure of 3 trillion. That's where the wrong thing is. You should start your budgeting always with the revenue side.
Okay. How much do I have?
How much do I have?
Yes.
Then add plus or minus whatever little you can borrow to meet and then do your budget based on that. But when you start it from the expenditure, it's a wish list, and you cannot do that. And I think that is where the National Assembly is wrong. That's why when the Mheshimiwa says I have only two options, either borrow or revenue, is already misplaced. Because the moment you reach there, then you are in serious trouble. And this is what happened in the 10 years of the former president. Mm-hmm. And for this government, look at the budget policy statement. For heaven's sake, these guys have already told us what they want to do in the next 5 years. In that budget policy statement, they have said for the next 5 years, they are going to borrow 4 trillion shillings. They've already determined that they're going to borrow 4 trillion. That's assuming they will get the revenues. If they don't get the revenue, I can assure you the figure will double.
But that's what they're working on, Bilo, by increasing the taxes and increasing the tax bracket, by taxing almost everyone on the way. That's what they're trying to address.
It's easy to tax, come up with tax policies, but when it comes to the collection, will you get it? I mean, you can't. That's where the challenge is. You can say, I hope to raise this amount, but you don't raise it. The businesses may not be there to generate the income. Businesses are making losses. Employers, with all these things, you have raised NSSF, NHIF, housing levy, and so many other taxes, payroll, pay-as-you-earn tax. They are going to reduce the employees. They are going to reduce their... So it's not going to be easy to generate the tax revenues. That's my take.
Okay, let me go to Kimani. Kimani, the thing is, you are working sort of backwards. You know how much money you want to spend. You don't know where to get that money, and you're looking for that money. And in that process, you're heavily burdening Kenyans. Does it concern you that the move you're about to make with the current budget is going to sink even more Kenyans into a hole that perhaps will be very hard to get out of?
To be absolutely honest with you, I am actually concerned about the current state of our economy. I'm very concerned about the contractual obligations we have. We have pending bills of almost 1 trillion shillings for the national government. If you add how much we owe in terms of our county governments, it's huge. We have borrowed more than we can pay, because right now, as I said earlier, our borrowing is around 9.3 trillion shillings. We barely have leg room out of the 10 trillion limit. And remember, we even increased this limit in last parliament. We have loans that were borrowed by previous regimes. We are already starting from a point where we owe people loans of 9.39 trillion shillings. And therefore, it's a concern to me, it's a concern of Kenyans. And every time we talk to Kenyans, they're telling us, we have to take care of our debt. We have too much debt. And that's why in my submission, I said, borrowing is no longer an option. In fact, that's why we're even recommending, even if you have to borrow, let's anchor the debt as a percentage of the GDP, so that we borrow as much as we are growing our GDP. We have not got there yet. But this finance bill, Ken and all Kenyans who are listening out there, has many taxes that we are reducing. I said, for example, VAT on LPG gas. LPG gas was attracting 8% VAT. We have scrapped that. The proposed bill scraps off that VAT from 8% to 0%. LPG gas was attracting import declaration duty, was attracting radio development levy. We have reduced that.
Okay.
Rental income, landlords were paying 10% for rental income tax. We have actually reduced rental income tax from 10% to 7.5%. That's a 2.5% reduction in rental income.
Okay.
If you talk about digital economy, we're talking about, Kenyans.
Tell me this, Mheshimiwa, before we break down those ones. Tell me this, just in a very short statement. What would it have costed this government to say, let's operate within our means until we get out of the situation we are in? Because right now it's costing the government the confidence of the people who voted for it. What would it have costed you to say that we have so much deficit, we cannot continue borrowing, we can operate within our means and stop this ambitious budget until we reach to a point that we know we can actually finance it? What would it have cost you if you decided to go that direction?
It would have affected us three major things. I started by saying we have these contractual obligations which you have to take care of. We have pending bills that we need to take care of. We have constitutional requirements of funding counties, and that is a constitutional requirement.
Okay.
So I'm sorry, Ken, but we can't sit down and say we stop country from moving forward. And remember also, even as much as we are saying we are in this hole, you cannot continue staying in that hole. You have to find your way up and get out of the hole.
Okay.
You don't do that by sitting down, by saying, fine, we're in a hole, so we sit there. No. We have to find a way of making sure that, for example, we have policies that don't just generate revenue, but also creates jobs. And that is why, for example, the proposal for the housing levy, which I understand is becoming very emotive to a lot of Kenyans, is not just a revenue-raising measure, it's a saving plan for all those that are going to be eligible
I'm
to
going
that
to come to that.
scheme.
It's contentious.
It's a scheme that requires employers to make a contribution. It is a scheme that will create millions of jobs to Kenyans.
Yeah, it's contentious, as you say, and I'm going to come to it. But let me bring back the discussion here. I'll be coming to you on specific proposals that are contentious, because that is not the only one. Even 35% is contentious, and the fact that it looks as though 50% of the earning will be going to pay taxes. I'll come back to that, but let me bring it now to you, Stephen. And you tell me, is it realistic what they're telling us? That the fact that we have so much to do in terms of our commitment, we have to get this money from somewhere. Is it realistic that they can get it from own revenue?
It's not realistic. The only thing that needs to happen, if you have a challenge, we need to ask ourselves, what is the best thing to do? The best thing to do is, how do we spur our businesses so that then we can create more and more wealth that then will translate into more revenues for the government. The second thing you need to look at, they need to look at the government wastage. There is a lot of wastage that happens in government. I mean, there is on record, even from the former regime, the head of state indicating that 2 billion are lost on daily basis. That's where to start. Cut on the wastages. If you look at the government absorption, even on the development budget that is ambitious, it's not 100% absorption. Now, when you cut on those, so that then you remain with the key spending and very targeted spending that will spur the economy. As the economy grows, the businesses do well, the revenues will start streaming in. And you can't introduce all things at a go. You can't be on one hand, you want to increase the pay as you earn to 35% to some group. You have already introduced NSSF at 6%. You're already, from the head of state speech in the Labor Day, you are proposing to introduce 2.75% on NHIF. Yeah. You are introducing housing levy 3% to the same. VAT, you are already increasing the VAT on petroleum, which is going to have an impact on many things, including the LPG that is, on one hand, I mean, this LPG is not manufactured in people's house. It has to move, and you have already increased the cost of movement. It's going to have an impact on that. Yeah. So all these things you are doing, at the end of the day, what's going to happen? You're going to have a population that has no money, businesses that have no cash flow, and not only that, look at some of the provisions that are now coming into place, even on the administration of taxes. They're adding more administrative costs to the businesses. Okay. Taxes that you be remittance, or you are to do perhaps on the 20th day of the month. So you had time to put together all things and then be able to remit. You are required to remit some 24 hours, some within 3 days. So there is the whole burden that comes into play. Okay. The second thing, the third thing that we need to ask the government, must it do what they are doing? Must they construct those houses? You only need to empower your citizens to construct their houses. In the village where I come from, you don't need to go and start constructing houses for people there. You just need to empower them, have the income so that they can be able to sort out themselves. Okay. Same thing, even in Nairobi, you need to facilitate an environment where the private citizen, the businesses can come in and be able to provide this. So when you look at housing, you have to look at it in the context where you are. We are talking about spurring the economy using the housing. The question is, where is the steel that is going to build those houses going to come from, within the country or outside?
Okay, a good point. But I want to bring Seth. I want to use a word that you have used to the table tonight, almost all of you, albeit in a different way. It looks as though these new proposals are very punitive. Read through the government. Why must they go this direction? And I'd want Bill also to answer this question. Why do you think the government is not concerned? Because ordinarily, they should be concerned with the plight of Kenyans. But why do they look so unconcerned with all these punitive measures?
I think they will say I'm very harsh, but I have to say the way I think and the way I look at it. I simply think the government has run out of options, or they did not have options in the first place. Because you cannot say that... The other day I received a letter from KRA because I pay tax for my employees, and they told me, can you submit your taxes? And I responded back and I said, my tax comes from the workers. The workers are employed by the county government of the national government. If the county government has not received money from you, the KRA, how do you expect me to pay my employees, then give you the tax? What does that one mean? It means if you're going to increase taxes for public servants and you're not expanding the generation of the gross domestic product is not increasing, you are not injecting new revenue into the system. You are not expanding, you are not creating employment for more workers so that they can be taxed to bring in more money. You will reach a stage where, as my brother said, Bilo has said, you will tax, yes, but there's no money coming. Because people
don't even have the money.
Who will you tax? Because where will that money come from? We depend solely on our members who are employees of the government. Now, this government is saying, give me money. And the county government is saying, you have not given us money. Because you have to give money to the county government. The county government have to give us money. We have to pay our employees, tax them, and give back to KRA. So the government has to come up with better ways of addressing these issues facing Kenyans. We believe as workers that this is just another way that the government want to reduce salaries for Kenyans. It's not an issue of getting money to do any project. Remember the 5%, what one of the senior government officials said, and I remember it was Honorable Musalia Mudavadi. He said Kenyans were already overtaxed, the 5% issue. You remember what Ndindi Nyoro said? Let us be honest. He said, you are collecting this money to help the handshake brothers to go and do more bribing because elections were coming. Now, when I am saying we must hold our leaders to account. What they say during campaigns, we must hold them to account. The truth is that the government seems to be running out of ideas.
Okay.
It wants to reduce workers' money, salaries, without telling the truth. Because if you cannot submit, like the NHIF today, we give NHIF a lot of money. No one is accounted to it. When you say you want to give now 2.7%, and we have not discussed with these people who are going to contribute, how the money is going to benefit them. You call that cut today to end a hospital, and they'll turn it away with you. We have those NHIF cards, but we still use our private medical schemes.
Okay.
So we, as workers, we are saying the taxes are too much. Let me tell you, electricity, look at the tax rates. When you go and buy your token today at 1,000 shillings, when you look at that, what you actually consume is about 399, which means they're taxing at around 60%. The same applies to fuel, to everything.
Okay. Bill, same question.
To answer that question,
yes,
yeah.
Same question, yeah.
I think that's a good question. I'll answer, but I also want to respond to what Mheshimiwa said. So to answer that question, the reason why these things are punitive is because of the way the executive have gone around this budgeting thing. About a few months ago, 4, 5 months, 6 months ago, the president did say that I want KRA to collect 4 trillion this year, 5 trillion next year, 6 trillion by 2027. You remember, yet KRA in its strategic planning documents, which is, medium term, they have about every 3 years they have. For this year, their target was only about 2.4 trillion. And they're told we want 3 trillion by the president. So the moment you are told, I want 3 trillion, Treasury now asks KRA, can you come up with proposals to raise 3 trillion? And it is that pressure to achieve that target which makes KRA to go back now to its Income Tax Act and look at how to get the 3. Even if it means hanging every one of us, they have to raise it. Otherwise, their jobs are on the line. And it was actually, many of them lost their jobs because of this. So this is why you find their measures are punitive, because KRA, as far as they are concerned, must meet a certain target, which is a policy directive from the executive, and they will. So it's up to the executive who are dealing with the politics of it. But as far as they're concerned on the technical bit, they will simply say, okay, we can tighten here, we can tighten here, we can raise here, and we can raise here. This is what they do. So, but I think the executive is not the issue. For me, the issue is the representatives of the people are parliament. These are the people who need to come and say tax should not be a burden. Tax should be fair. It does not help on the cost of living. No, you cannot have this. But I want to just respond to one of the issues that he said also earlier, which is about the debt. You see, I don't know whether members of parliament have looked at the budget policy statement. Very clearly it says this government over the next 4 years is going to raise additional 4 trillion. So you cannot talk about 10 trillion. And this is assuming that, for example, this year the target of revenue in this new budget is 2.9 trillion. What if KRA only raises 2 trillion? It means the extra 900 has already been budgeted as an expense they have to borrow. That's why I believe the borrowing will double to more than 8. If they're worried about 6 trillion, they should worry about this government raising it up to 3 trillion. Number 2, and last one, the 7 months now from September, the figures that have already been published by Central Bank and Treasury, they have already borrowed 578 billion as at end of March. 578 billion. Today, every day they're signing new loans. Today you saw it, the one for IMF, additional 136, the IMF World Bank. Every day, last week you saw $3 billion, Africa Exim Bank. Every day they're signing. I don't know whether these members of parliament who say that we should be taxing people because we don't want to borrow are aware that we're actually borrowing much more than the previous government was borrowing. So you are doing both. You're taxing Kenyans and you're also borrowing.
So what is the essence? Yes. I see your point. So, Mheshimiwa, having said that, I'd like to ask you a direct question, and because next I want to go to the nitty-gritties, some elements in this financial bill 2023. Is there a foreign hand that perhaps would be piling pressure on the government to have to make it so punitive? Is there a foreign hand in this? Because we see a lot of them, IMF, World Bank, all of them are here. Do you think that's one of the reasons why the demand for more money from us is happening?
The only pressure we have is a pressure to make Kenya work. The only pressure we have is to make sure that as much as we can, we reduce the appetite for debt. The much pressure we have is to make sure that we connect as many Kenyans as possible to the national grid of electricity, to increase our road connection, to have programs that actually add jobs to Kenyans. Mm-hmm. And Ken, allow me to say this, because my three other panelists, and I'm disadvantaged to be the only one speaking more pro for the bill, has talked about what is bad, and said how this is not even conducive for business. But give me a few minutes to tell you how this bill is good for business and for business people. I talked about VAT, import duty, and railway development levy on LPG gas. This should reduce the cost of LPG gas by around 10%. Rental income, we're reducing our rental income tax from 10% to 7.5%. So what this shall do is that it should consequently reduce the cost of how much you pay for rent in both office rent and rent for in our apartments. It also makes it easier how landlords are going to be accountable for this tax, including the tax, the rent agents to be the agents for collection of this particular tax. So, which means that we are going to have more people who will pay their rightful share of tax. Because you and I, Ken, that are actually employed, we don't get to determine whether we want to pay our pay or not. We pay all the time. But we have a lot of businesses that are booming, but they're not paying their rightful share of tax. The president promised that this government is going to value digital economy. And what are we doing about it? We're reducing excess duty on airtime. We're reducing excess duty on bank to M-Pesa or to Airtel money transactions. Okay. The pensioners, what we are calling Pesa ya Wazee, the money that we're giving to old people, the 3,000 shillings, or how much we're giving to pensioners, we are now adding a medical relief to pensioners so that pensioners are able to get a relief. The biggest headache for our businesses has also been inflation adjustment. Because, Ken, immediately after you pass the finance bill into law, a few months later, the current law gives power to the CG for KRA to vary the inflation adjustment, which consequently varies the amount of excess duty that is paid. We have scrapped that off. We have removed the inflation adjustment that was making our tax environment unpredictable. These are some of the things that are actually going to make sure that we spur economic growth, that we ensure our businesses grow. For example, Ken, we have many of us that registered our businesses and our companies when we're investing, without necessarily knowing the tax obligation that registration of these companies meant. Okay. We are giving amnesty to all penalties and fines that were incurred before December of 2023 to anybody that comes and claims for that amnesty. Okay. So it means out of the 894,000 companies, which only around 74,000 actually pay their tax, all these others that have been blacklisted by KRA because they're not able to, because of their penalties and fines, we are taking them away out of that penalties and fines. Okay. Which means, therefore, that we are going to have more taxpayers. We're going to have these companies back to business. We are going to have these companies back to trade with government, which will enhance job creation. Okay. So we have a bill with us here that actually has many tax incentives for both small business people. Even talked about turnover tax. It was very complicated before. We have simplified it. Which says you pay this particular percentage, we're done. We don't have to worry about what is tax allowable and what is not. Because we want this country to work, Ken.
I need to ask you this, Mheshimiwa, just in 30 seconds. I need to come back here also. The gentlemen, lest they begin to sleep. So let me ask you, what is your projection? Because the policy statement from the Kenya Revenue Authority, the collection projection is above what you are budgeting for. Tell me, in a very short statement, how much more money do you think you're going to add on top of the 2 trillion that was collected last year? What about 2.2 trillion that was collected? How much more is your projection for this?
Our fiscal deficit now is around 50 billion. We anticipate that we're going to collect much more than that, because all these measures and all this, even for example, Ken, just to answer your question a little indirectly and give more information, a part of how much we think we are collecting in terms of taxes is 1.9 trillion shillings tax debt.
Okay.
Is money that we have put in our books that we hope to collect this, but we cannot, because that is the penalties and interests that have been accrued on this. I told you, over 800 companies. So we are taking all this out. So my friend Kelly Bilo doesn't need to be worried about if he hasn't remitted his pay for his employees because the county government have not paid for the jobs he has done. Not especially because not a problem of his own. We are giving him amnesty.
Okay.
He doesn't have to pay the fines and penalties as long as you pay the principal amount. So which means that we are going to free even our books to be realistic about how much we're going to raise in this country as revenues to support our budget.
I really needed a figure. I don't know, gentlemen on the table. What is the more? You will give me the figure. Okay, you will give me the figure. Okay. What is the most realistic additional amount do you think, Bilo, for example, he can or the government can raise in this financial year, realistically?
Yeah, ending June 2022, KRA collected 2.03 trillion. Okay. 2 trillion. This year already, 9 months gone, with only 2 months left, May and June, they are already behind that 2 trillion by about 100 billion. So they are unlikely even to get the 2 trillion by June 30 this year. My estimate in next financial year for the 23-24, I doubt if they'll get more than 2.3 trillion. I don't think they'll get anything more than that. So to budget for 2.9 trillion is a joke. That's my take.
That's your take. You want to go on that? What is the most realistic figure you think they can add on top of what they're collecting?
You see, the realistic figures can only come if we are seeing expansion in investments. But what is happening is that the more taxes Kenyans are being imposed on are affecting the investments. We have companies now leaving Kenya. How do you expect extra revenue when you are chasing away companies? I don't expect any revenue to grow. I don't expect, they will only tax, and after they tax, those taxes will not be collected because they will not be there.
There's a study that showed, Stephen, that less than or about 100,000 Kenyans are only about 100,000 Kenyans, employed Kenyans, earn more than 100,000 shillings. Yeah. How is it realistic that they're going to get more money from this small group?
It is not realistic. It is, and I want what the Honorable former Senator said, that what we are seeing is a wish list and hoping that there will be some miracle to make it happen. We need...
Okay, proceed.
We need to come to reality. Reality, I mean, even if you look at it as household, we always say try to live within your means. You don't start from an example where you're saying you're in Nairobi and then you say, oh my God, I want this house of 1 billion shillings, yet you only have 1 million in your pocket. And so you start doing all sorts of funny things to ensure that then you get the billion for the house. You say, I have 1 million shillings and this is what I can afford.
Let me live in a 1 million shilling house.
Let me live in a 1 million shilling house.
But where does that leave the growth and development of a country?
Now,
the legal obligations, where does that leave them?
The growth and development of a country. Government does not create jobs. Government facilitates an environment that the companies, the businesses can thrive in, and then they will be able to grow the economy. The people, and I want us to remember there was a debate about, I think when we were going to the elections, and if I remember very well, it was the last debate with the current deputy president had with the then contestant from the Azimio, and he was asked and said, what is the one thing that you are assuring Kenyans? He said, money in their pockets. Yes. What is this bill doing? Removing money in their pocket. And now, you know why it is bad for the employers. The next thing, we'll be talking about the cost of living and all that, and we say, you know what, the employer, you need now to increase salary. And Panyako will be on my neck and doing all sorts of things. You need to increase the salaries, and we'll be asking,
Yet
where
the output probably will not increase.
we are going to have, the employer is going to spend so heavily on the payroll costs, because all things that are being loaded on it, and he's going at the same time to have very demoralized employees, because we have what we call the tax wage on labor. The tax wage on labor, which is how much is actually the employer spending on the employee and how much is ending up in his pocket. That is being eroded. And then the little that ends up in the employee's pocket, these other taxes are removing. Now, we are talking about growth of the economy, growth of the people. What does that mean? The people need to have the power to create wealth in their own small spheres and wherever they are. That can only happen if people have income that is a surplus to them to do the little investments they can do. This bill is not doing that. The last thing I want you to look at, Kenya is highly informal. If you look at the recent statistics on wage employment, there is a marginal growth of informality if you compare with the formal sector. The proposals in this bill, it's going to be more better to operate informally than to operate in a formal way. So what are we going to see? A growth in informality. How are these taxes going to be collected from that sector?
Doom. You're just spelling doom and gloom tonight. Doom and gloom tonight.
Let's be realistic. Let's come back to Kenya. Say we have a country, we have a context we are in. But what can be done in this context?
But let me ask you this, Bill. Best case scenario, it's going to go to Parliament. Azimio has taken, and after this I'll go to the to break it down. But worst case scenario, Azimio has said, you know, we are opposing. Kenya Kwanza, which is falls short of getting a super majority in both houses, says we pass it. What happens to us? What happens to Kenyans?
What happened is what has happened in 2016. They'll pass it.
They'll pass it.
That one is not a, I mean, today Parliament has become, they play second fiddle to executive. I mean, they've become an appendage of the executive. They'll pass, it's a rubber stamp. That's what Parliament has become. It's a pity that this is the institution that should represent, that they should be taking a pen and pencil and going through this thing and say, no, this is not acceptable. Where is all this thing about reducing cost of living? Let us look at, they are not looking at that. And they have already said we are going to pass it. And they'll pass it because, as usual,
what
happens is times are going to be more difficult. And the government will blame Ukraine, they'll blame demonstrations, they'll blame everything else except themselves. And life goes on. That's what will happen. But it's really unfortunate because I would have expected this government to sit down with business, for example, and ask, how do we create jobs? How can we expand investments? In fact, they're rolling back investments. They're rolling back, I'm in business.
But
I know what the government is doing.
They did that already during the campaigns because they basically sat with everyone from every sector in this country to give them ideas.
During the campaign. But that was campaign. That was campaign and ask him what they... everybody presented his wish list and everybody's wish list was agreed. But how much of that is now being... for example, they said manufacturing. We'll make sure it increases from 7.5 to 20%. They're killing manufacturing. But that I can tell you for a fact. By importing and dumping things duty-free through Kenya National Trading Corporation to line the pockets of their friends. So I think...
you're explaining as a businessman now.
Yeah, as a businessman, yes. And this is something that we have been... And I gave you an example today. The CS of Trade traveling on a delegation to Indonesia to discuss business. And today posting that I'm meeting with business leaders. He doesn't have a single businessman with him from Kenya. He doesn't have anyone from industry, whether it's Kenya manufacturers or KEPSA. I mean, this is what they are doing every day. You see the president traveling on investment. Tell me one trip where they have gone with businessmen or business leaders in this country. How do you discuss? Well, they're business
in themselves.
So I don't think we can run this country by taxing people and by collecting more loans. You must stop the loan thing. In the long run, we can survive. Otherwise, the more you collect loans, we are in a vicious cycle. We will not go anywhere.
The more loans you have.
And your question was not answered by the...
he didn't.
It's IMF. The main driver behind the push for more taxes is IMF. And this they said very clearly about in February, when the president said, I want to collect 3 trillion. IMF president representative here responded, it's in the public domain. And at the same time, we are going to support the president 100%. You must raise more taxes in order to reduce the budget deficit. And so for them, it's about paying their loans, so they want you to pay more taxes.
Why is it that they can't admit that there's a foreign hand in this? And Mheshimiwa, I need to come back to you for the final word on this, because my question is now very specific. From where you sit, do you believe as Kenyan First, before you look at yourself as a representative of the people of Molo, that the budget statement that is about to go before Parliament, that is about to be debated, is actually progressive and should be hailed instead of being demonized by individuals and organizations such as the ones that are represented here tonight? Do you believe it's very progressive and it will take us to Canaan?
Yes. First of all, Ken, I really have taken very keen interest in listening to whether it's my panelists are saying, whether it's Kenyans, it's what Kenyans are saying, because Article 118 of our Constitution is very clear on issues of public participation, that every piece of legislation that has to be passed at Parliament has to go through public participation. As per this evening, we did an advert on our dailies the day before yesterday, that's on Monday, asking members of the public to send memoranda. And so far as this afternoon, we had received around 600 memoranda from people across all sectors giving their views, telling us what they like about their bill, telling us about what they think should be corrected about the bill. The week after next, we're going to start off our public participation as a Committee on Finance and National Planning, and we're going to give a chance to Kenyaization of manufacturers, to business people, to contractors, to as many Kenyans as we can. In fact, this time round, we want to even do a niche hire. Instead of just doing this public participation in a hotel or Parliament where it's not accessible, we want to sample a few counties and actually get to hear what people are and or what people want to saying about this. And the reason why I'm here this evening on this is to tell you what is good in the bill. Is for you to tell us what you don't like in the bill. And then we find out how we best make the country work.
Mheshimiwa, what will you do with that information? Yet part of the Kenya Kwanza team, I would quote Cherargei, he has said, Senator Cherargei, that this will be passed without an amendment, not even a change in the comma where a comma falls or full stop. What is the purpose of these memorandums that you're asking from Kenyans, from KMA, from employers? What do you want to do with it? What do you want to do with it?
I may not speak on behalf of Senator, but I have served in the Committee of Finance and National Planning for the last 5 years. So, and this is my second time and I've served in this committee. And I actually know that there is a lot of work that goes on. We actually get to listen. And sometimes and even for this one, we are going, even when we have what we think is right, we are going up the open mind. And if then we have because we think it's a great idea. But if we find out that someone brings out a better idea, we're willing to listen. Okay. Because this administration wants to be an administration that listens to Kenyans. We want it to work. Okay. Let me tell you, Ken, even the reason why we are saying all this, the reason why I have said all the things I'm saying, the reason why we are trying to sensitize the people is because we want this country to work. Okay. You Kenyans have told us for sure they don't want us to borrow. They have told us they want development. And I could go on and on about what government expenditure, because when you say that you reduce government expenditure, actually, government expenditure is a great contributor to economic development. Because once that road is done, once that money is spent prudently, and that road is done, and that village is connected to power, and that community is connected to water, and schools are built, and universities are funded, it actually has a direct impact on economic growth. You've made your point. Which is why we are doing all we can to make sure it works.
Okay. Let me come back to the table and get back to you.
No evil here, no evil. You know, by now, as the representative of the people, Finance Committee should have already flagged some of those provisions which they believe are counterproductive or punitive or, adding to the cost of living by now, without even getting views from other Kenyans. But I think listening to the Mheshimiwa, as far as they're concerned, everything here is okay. But and that's where the trouble is. And I have sat in these committees before. There isn't much you expect in terms of what the input is from outside. Whatever is collected in the public hearings, are almost 99% going to be ignored. Even if Parliament takes it on board, Treasury will just dump them. I mean, there isn't any time I can remember in Parliament where views were collected on this kind of thing. And you remember in 2016, when the IMF's 16% VAT on fuel came, the same thing, the views were collected. Everybody said no, but they wouldn't.
He says it's a listening government. Perhaps they will listen.
All I wish they would listen. In fact, if this government would listen, they would do better than the previous one.
Okay.
I hope they do.
Okay.
So far, their record is not good.
Anyone who wants to weigh in, because I want to go to specifics, I want to read them, and if you could just bring them up, the graphics mark that we had earlier, and I just want you gentlemen to pick any that you think you need to address here. So the first one is the deposit of about 20% of disputed tax to KRA ahead of settlement, so that if anything happens, you know, they are already secured. So you have to deposit that. That's coming up. Introduction of an export and investment promotion levy on specific imports. The graphics will be up shortly. 30% tax on per diems. I presume this is for the civil servants, government officials, because they can dictate this on the side. I don't know if that will work. 3% contribution to finance affordable housing projects. Increase of turnover tax by 2% from 1%. 50% withholding tax on digital content creators. You can go to the next slide now. And 15% duty on betting and alcohol products, adverts going on TV, radio, and the rest. 5% duty on wigs and other beauty products. I just picked a few. VAT increase on petroleum products from 8 to 16%. Import declaration fee has been taken down to 2.5%. Exemption of exported services from VAT. I presume that's labor, which the president is also very big on, exporting labor. And VAT exemption on flour and sugarcane transportation. So you can pick any that you think is of concern to you. The graphics will be playing on the board. So I'll begin with you, Seth. Which one is of concern to you as you watch them on the screen?
All these things are of concern to me because the net effect is that there will be increase in taxation. When you increase in taxation, you tax workers too much, then you tax employers. What are you going to do? You are going to give the middle class. When employers start closing shop and moving to other countries, we're going to have people who are jobless. These people who are jobless are going to cause insecurity in the country. So when you look at VAT, for example, of petroleum products from 8 to 16%, and you reflect on what we said when we are going to form government, we said we are going to remove, in fact, the VAT completely.
Can you forget a little bit about what you said and just weigh it against the proposal that is there currently?
But that's what I'm talking
because
about.
Because when you mention it against the proposal at that time, it looks as though you have reneged on that process.
When the problem that we make, you don't want to hold politicians at account on what they promised to the people. We promised that we will lower the cost of living by dealing with some of the taxes. We have come with a raft of taxes which are not only going to affect workers, but are also going to affect employers and prospective investors who want to invest in this country.
Okay.
The net effect will be we will have no people coming to invest in Kenya, and the few we have will be leaving. I will give you a good example. Flower farms today have said they are no longer going to employ anybody on permanent because of these too many taxes. So what are we saying? We are now going to have more casuals in the flower industry because they cannot sustain permanent and pensionable people. So at the end of the day, we will have more Kenyans who do not have jobs. We are now going to create a class of unemployed Kenyans, well-educated, no jobs, and insecurity is going to go up.
Tell me, what happens if it's passed? I know Bilo said to definitely pass. What happens?
If it's going to be passed, of course, we will, as workers, will resist it. We'll use all systems available to resist this draconian bill because it's going to kill the Kenyan middle class. It will wipe it completely. It will make sure that the companies close shop.
What is the net effect of you resisting? What will happen? Can it be reviewed, Bill? Can it be taken back?
Why not?
After
Why
6
not?
months. No.
After 6 months, yes, that's how it happens. It goes to Parliament after 6 months.
It's only the court.
We are going to ask. We are asking Parliament not to pass that bill.
What if?
We are asking the people on the ground to ask their members of Parliament not to pass that bill.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Your concern, sir?
First, we are concerned with any proposal that is increasing the payroll costs. Businesses, and Mheshimiwa said he's in business. Cash flow is very important to a business, to the sustainability of that business, to the growth of that business. So, and there is a number of proposals that are actually taking away money from the business and limiting the cash flow. Now, let me start with the fuel levy. That is going to be some sort of a regressive tax if it is increased. With the proposal that we have, the fuel, the price, the pump price for petrol, say, is going to go up by almost 14 shillings. Now, all the products that move in this country depend on that. Everyone is going to feel it. We are going to have very unhappy country. The second thing that is going to do, energy costs are very important when it comes to production. And on one hand, we are saying we want to improve our manufacturing, we want to improve our business, our production, and all that. That is going to be affected. Now, the other thing, look at the housing, the 3% housing levy. And I know the challenge we are having with this government, they're not looking at in totality of what is being proposed. They're isolating one thing and say, it's only 3%. I mean, why should the employers be crying about 3%? Now, to the employer, it's not actually 3%, it's going to be 6%. 6%. How? Because the 3% that are even loaded to the employee, Panyako here will be saying, our cost of living has increased, and what will be cited will be just 3%. Come to the negotiations of the CBA, they will be asking, can you load first of all the 3%, then you have also the 6%, and what are you going to have? We already are in the regime. I mean, you look at the papers, you have the data in the Ministry of Labor, redundancies are happening. Okay. Many people are losing jobs, there is restructuring happening, and at the same time when you are already, many businesses were destroyed by COVID, some of them have recovered. We have people who lost their employment and their businesses during COVID. They have not even gone back to COVID, to where the pre-COVID situation. Now, we are again introducing this is going to get them out of employment. And then the other challenge we are having with this mandatory 3% housing is going to create a monster, because you need competition for you to be able to grow, to improve in efficiency. We are simply saying, whether you like it or not, we are going to put money here. Let's put in place policies that that support competition. Okay. And the last observation about this bill that is specific is the dates of implementation. In any good policy making environment, any bill that is bringing in changes in the monies and in the costs of doing business and all that, you give business adequate time to be able to adjust as you try to see how the country is moving. And so for us, we have a very great concern with that, and including the movement of the 1% minimum tax from 1% to 3%. And you see that two things that are happening at the same time. 1% moves to 3%, and then it was applying from 1 million to 50 million. It is now from 500,000 to, I mean, we are killing businesses.
Let me...
His summary is basically everything there, but
yeah,
go ahead.
But the actual cost on payroll for some of the companies will be well over 10%, between 10 to 20%. By the time you take on board NHIF, NSSF, housing levy, and the taxes of pay that have been increased, employers are going to pay over between 10 to 15% additional tax. The impact of that, he has already said, layoff employees. Why would a company absorb that cost? Two, for people who want to expand their businesses or invest in this country, we are no longer competitive. These measures, many of them kill the competitiveness. And I, you know, there are many examples of that, you know, and I'll give you one which I find very unusual. It's the 10% levy. They call export and investment promotion levy, something that Kenya Association of Manufacturers have tried to stop the government from introducing, because what we are doing is to protect certain companies in the country so that no one else should compete with them. The impact of that is the cost of production will be higher now for companies that are in, for example, construction industry, because you said, for example, clinkers, you're going to charge this 10%, and so forth. So I think some of the measures are clearly intended to support certain specific companies, and it will lead in more. The third one I want to mention, which is very important, is you mentioned here, the 20% deposit.
Yeah.
This would be unconstitutional. You cannot stop my right to go to court to challenge a decision of the KRA. So trying to tell me to put 20% of the tax disputed, into KRA account before you go to court is trying to tell me don't go to court.
Yes.
I think this will be challenged, and I want to say many of these things, by the way, they may be challenged in court and they will not stand. And one of them is that one, the one which you haven't mentioned, but it's very strange. When you go through, you'll see they have expanded the definition of the word person in Income Tax Act, to include relatives, and it's a very, I hope it's a mistake, and if they don't amend it, it means you'll be responsible for your tax and those of all your spouses and your cousins and your uncles, and but lastly, I want to say that we are in a region where we used to lead in export. We were competitive in our cost of production. Today we are losing the edge in everything. That's why we are importing everything from maize to eggs and tomato. Now we are going to lose that competitiveness to even export manufactured goods. And I think there are many of the measures here which are punitive and which will make the cost of... I'll give you one for Mama Mboga. They said you must, if you're invoicing somebody, use an electronic tax invoice. And you are out there in Mandera or in Nyeri and you are doing your small little kiosk. I mean, some of these measures are so burdensome, it's impossible for you to do some of those things. For example, you have to submit withholding tax, VAT withholding tax, which I deduct when I'm paying my supplier. I must pay it within 3 days. If you are a company doing so many invoices in a day, you'll be throughout the day you are busy with those things. The burden of you ensuring that my supplier has paid his VAT, it has also been placed on me. I mean, you cannot do some of the things that are here.
I am hoping that it's relooked at. But gentlemen, we are running out of time. I'd like to play the video of the week and pay attention to the video of the week. Musalia Mudavadi speaking before he joined Kenya Kwanza. And listen to what he says. And when we come together with Mheshimiwa Kuria on the other side, we'll give you each a minute to close. But this is our video of the week.
The newly introduced 1.5% house tax on the Kenyan worker purports to be an intervention that will provide comfort in shelter. Yet it is at once insensitive, burdensome, because you are taxing an already overloaded worker. It is also unlawful. This worker is already burdened with just about the highest income tax in the world today. Add to this value-added tax on a wide range of goods and services. Load on a myriad of levies on petrol and petroleum products. Then now, bring in this new levy. You are killing the goose that lays the golden egg. Kenyans, if this government is truly committed to affordable housing, it must make it possible for Kenyans to build houses affordably on their own.
All right, that's a good place to end the show tonight, but I'd like to give you a minute each because that was Musalia Mudavadi then. I wonder if he's still thinking like that right now. But let me go to Mombasa and Mheshimiwa Kuria, your closing remarks. And as you close for us, tell us, what do you see happening? Do you see this bill with all these concerns passing when it goes to the floor because of the majority members of parliament from your side? And if that happens, what do you see happening days after that? I know there'll be court cases according to Mheshimiwa here, but tell me from where you sit.
Thank you very much, Ken. Again, this is a conversation we are having because a lawmaking process is a conversation. And I'm hoping that I'll be able to convince majority of Kenyans. I'm hoping that I'm going to convince members of the National Assembly to the great proposals that we have in this particular bill. You mentioned a few of the things that are on the bill and what is of interest. I'll pick one issue, cryptos. Ken, a lot is changing in the digital world, where payments are now not being made necessarily by bank transfers, but by bitcoins and cryptocurrencies. And Kenya is going to be the first, after Salvador, to use to first of all make money out of cryptocurrencies and bitcoins by charging a withholding tax on it, but also that technically recognizes cryptos and bitcoins as a form of payment, which revolutionizes the entire financial sector. The issue of housing has been dealt with in a very big way. Don't just look at it from the demand side, look at it from the supply side. What does this do? World Bank, a survey done by World Bank shows that there is a deficit of 2 million houses in this country. We have every year a deficit of, the private sector is only able to do like 50,000, which means there is a deficit of 200,000 houses per year. And we are saying, if we just have 5 people, on the minimum 5 people working on one housing unit, it means creating 1 million jobs per year. That is what it means. It means that we are going to have structured housing units. It means we are going to have, in fact, part of the proposal is to make sure that this is not just in the cities, but across the 290 constituencies. So if you have these 1 million jobs created through this housing and distributed across the 290 constituencies, then you're going to find a lot of Kenyans getting jobs in this. There's another bold step of exempting VAT on exported services, exempting VAT on exported services. This is a great revolution, especially to those people that export services, because it means that Kenya becomes now a regional hub for export of consultancy services to the rest of the region. And in fact, after this, you've seen what of the memoranda I was telling you earlier that you're receiving from public participation is a lot of multinationals now getting interest to come and set base in Kenya and now operate from Kenya and offer these services from across the region. Okay. There are a lot of tax incentives to manufacturers, including manufacturers of vaccines and pharmaceuticals, so that we are able to manufacture our own medicine. There's a lot of tax incentive on manufacturers of agricultural machinery and pesticides. There is tax incentive on value addition of our tea, so that we not just export our tea as it is raw, so that we make sure we add value addition to our tea. So I'm saying there are a lot of very good things that actually get to attract investors, to attract manufacturers into a country. And if they're implemented, we're going to have a revolution in our economy.
Okay, Mheshimiwa, there is a lot, and you picked quite a few that are vital. I didn't pick up the crypto one because the Central Bank of Kenya doesn't recognize use of crypto in the country. That's why I didn't pick it. But thank you very much, Mheshimiwa, joining us from the coast. And of course, I'll come back to the table here. I'll begin with you, Seth, again. Just in 1 minute, wrap it up for us.
All I have to say is that we ask members of parliament to reconsider this bill, make necessary amendments, and pass a bill that is going to grow our economy and expand our investment and make sure that Kenya is competitive so that we can create more employment and have a conducive working environment. There is no any worker in Kenya who has asked any government to build a house for her. As an African man, it is my responsibility to build a house for my family. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephen, your closing remark?
The country is bleeding. The fear that this bill is sending to people, to employers, to everybody, is very evident with the sentiments that are coming to our leaders. Let them remember the words of Winston Churchill, who said, "If you try to tax yourself prosperity, it's like you are standing in a bucket and you're trying to lift yourself. You can't be able to do it." Okay. Elected leaders are there to protect the people from excesses and ensure that we have a happy country that is competitive. We are operating in regional framework, African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement, the East Africa Common Market Protocol. We are in a COMESA region. Many companies have left Kenya because of the high cost of doing business. Let's not aggravate the worst situation.
Okay.
Let's reconsider this bill, remove the things that are hurting, reconsider our spending. We must not spend what almost the 3 trillions. Look at the wastage side. Reconsider what is it that we must spend on, and how strategic is it. If we are able to close the wastages, remove the wastages, the leakages, deal with the corruptions here and there, we'll save enough to get us out of this situation, the challenges we have, without hurting the economy.
Okay. You've spoken about corruption, and I remember the interview I had with the president in 2020, then deputy president, and he said, when I become the president, there will be no money to steal. So you've spoken corruption, and I've just thought about that. And finally, Bilo.
All right, two things. One on the issue of the fuel, the VAT on fuel, and the housing. First, I think the two measures are the dumbest in the entire bill. Look at fuel. Before this government was elected, there was a bill that was in Parliament and was sent to the President to reduce, when there was uproar last year about the high cost of fuel, to reduce some of the levies and taxes on fuel. And today, what have they done? They have increased the fuel from VAT on fuel from 8 to 16%. And this is going to do one thing. Kiss goodbye 3 terminologies in the KK government. Forget about reducing cost of living. You will never hear that word again, because the cost of living will go up. Forget about the bottom-up stories and the hustler stories. All those things will go, because the moment you raise fuel by 16%, by 8%, and you have already removed the subsidy, and globally the way the world economy is, you are going to forget about those things. The second one is on the housing. I think housing, we have said, is not a priority. Even the basic things we studied in school, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Housing comes after you put bread on the table. People don't have bread. Why are you worried about financing houses in Mandera? Who told you people of Mandera need houses? Who told you? They don't have food. Those guys in the north lost 3.5 million animals to drought. That's not your property. They have not even found a way of getting back their livelihoods. You're worried about the housing. Create an environment for investors to put up housing. What is the environment? Reduce the cost of construction. And you can do that by addressing the issues of taxes around construction. You can do that by addressing the issues of policies that are involved in housing. That makes it very difficult for you to build a house, even the low cost. By the time you have gone through all the government agencies, from NEMA to national construction, to what, you will have given up on housing in this country. So I mean, you can create, and we will do the housing. It's not your business. It's not your priority. Forget about some things. Please provide jobs and provide incomes and reduce the cost of unga. Those are the fundamentals, in my view.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. On page 12 of the Bold newspaper, The Standard, it's talking about why Finance Bill 2023 is likely to sail through and impose higher taxes. Kenya Kwanza boasts of 179 members and a total of 349 members against Azimio's 157. President banking on increased access to finance ambitious budget of 3.6 billion, what we've been talking about tonight, and plug an 800 billion deficit. Page 12 of the Bold newspaper. A very interesting story next to it on page 13 of why the state is split on bid to abolish law, making suicide attempted crime. That's also the Bold newspaper. But look at the headline. Tomorrow, if you have an opportunity to listen to Spice in the Morning, there will be the Defense Cabinet Secretary Aden Duale, who's coming to speak to us about For the Record. Now, the Standard Group has so many pages of this book. I think this is about 5 pages. So by the Standard, if you haven't bought the book, learn about what Aden Duale is talking about. That's the story, the headline of the Bold newspaper. And of course, there are other stories making headlines. And Trump charged 684 million for sexual abuse, plus why the banks reject Treasury big tax plans. All in the Bold newspaper. As I always say, only the bold speak the truth. Grab a copy of your Standard newspaper. I want to thank you very much, gentlemen, for speaking to us. Kimani Kuria, the Chairperson, Finance and National Planning Committee, all the way from Mombasa on official duties. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Bilo Kero, former Senator, Mandera County, asante sana kwa kuja. Always a pleasure hosting you. Stephen Obiro, Head of Advocacy, Consulting and Partnerships at Federation of Kenyan Employers, asante sana kwa kuja. And General Secretary, why is it not Secretary General? Why is it General Secretary? Anyway, that's a question for another day. Seth Panyako, SG. Thank you so much from the Kenya National Union of Nurses. Thank you so much for watching our show tonight. This has been News Hour and Damian Evans earlier on Sign Language. You do this again whenever we have an opportunity. I'll be back on air tomorrow night on KTN Prime. Have a good night and God bless on behalf of the whole team. My name is Ken Mijungu. Good night.